Welcome back to the show. This week, I want to start with a mental image that I think perfectly captures where the AI industry actually is right now. You know, when you watch a magic trick, the whole point is that you don't see the trapdoor, you just see the rabbit magically appear out of thin air. Honestly, that's exactly how most of us have been interacting with AI. You tap a prompt, hit enter, and a fully written essay or a photorealistic image just materializes on your screen. It feels weightless, like it's all floating up in the cloud somewhere. Today, we are ripping up the floorboards. We're looking past the chatbot hype to show you the hidden engine room of the entire AI boom. And it turns out that engine room is massive, brutally physical, and hitting walls that no software patch can fix. If you've been trying to understand why AI is suddenly crashing into physical reality robots, learning to walk and cooperate as teams, data centers so hungry for power, they're breaking local grids, tech giants at all-out war over talent and trade secrets, you're in exactly the right place. Our mission today is to act as your senior AI industry analyst. We're sifting through a massive stack of sources from the past 7 days to figure out what actually matters for your strategic outlook. Because looking at all of this collectively, one central thesis emerges. The primary bottleneck for AI is no longer algorithmic intelligence. The bottleneck is now physical infrastructure, energy constraints, and an incredibly cutthroat battle for intellectual property. We are officially transitioning from a software race to a heavy industry race. Let's get into it. Before we get into it, quick note. If this is the kind of analysis you come here for, hit the like button and subscribe. It's the single most useful signal you can send that this work is worth doing. Takes a second, means a lot. Now, let's get into it. The best place to see this software to physical collision is with the fact that AI models are finally getting bodies. Google just launched Gemini Robotics 2, introducing what they call whole body intelligence, powered by a vision language action model, or VLA. To understand why a VLA is a big deal, think about how older robots worked. It was thousands of lines of hard-coded instructions. The programmer literally had to write move joint A by 15 degrees, then move joint B by 10 degrees. Incredibly brittle. If anything changed in the environment, the robot just froze or fell over. A VLA completely bypasses that. It takes a raw video feed from the robot's cameras, processes the pixels, combines it with a natural language command like pick up the heavy box, and directly translates that understanding into continuous fluid motor commands. It controls full humanoids from feet to fingertips without any explicit joint-by-joint programming. Google paired this with a companion release called Gemini Robotics ER. 2ER stands for embodied reasoning. The mechanism here is what separates a rigid machine from a truly autonomous agent. The ER2 model reportedly allows a robot to watch its own continuous video feed and reason in real time. If it reaches for a cup and the cup slips, the neural network predicts the visual outcome of that failure frame by frame and adjusts the torque in its robotic fingers to catch it before it falls, self-correcting via live visual feedback. And crucially, this shared reasoning reportedly allows multiple robots to collaborate as a team. They can analyze a cluttered room and autonomously divide tasks based on what they can physically reach in that moment. And we're seeing the same push on the open source side. NVIDIA just released Alpamayo 2, an open source model specifically designed for robotaxis and autonomous vehicles. They're calling this new category World Action Models, or WAMs. Instead of just mapping words to images, these models are reportedly trained on hundreds of millions of video and physical action samples. They're literally learning the physics of the real world, momentum, friction, gravity, just by analyzing video data. AI has essentially graduated from the middle management desk of writing emails and analyzing spreadsheets and moved to the factory floor where it has to operate heavy machinery. Processing continuous video and predicting physics in real time requires a staggering amount of compute, which leads directly to the massive infrastructure deals happening behind the scenes. Anthropic just signed a reported $10 billion 6-year cloud deal with a startup called Volta. And what's wild is that Volta was only founded earlier this year. A $10 billion commitment to a brand new startup illustrates the absolute desperation for computing power right now. Here's where it gets interesting. Volta is reportedly partnering with a crypto mining company called BitDeer to actually fulfill this contract. They're building a massive 133 megawatt data center in Norway, entirely packed with NVIDIA's state-of-the-art Vera Rubin chips. Just to put that in perspective for you listening, 133 megawatts is enough electricity to power roughly 100,000 homes dedicated entirely to a single data center complex. The irony of a crypto mining company pivoting to AI data centers is thick. We used to hear endless complaints about Bitcoin mining boiling the oceans, and now they're simply swapping out the crypto rigs to train large language models instead. The mechanism driving them to Norway is pure infrastructure logic. When you pack tens of thousands of Vera Rubin chips into a single facility, the heat generation is off the charts. Norway offers a naturally cold climate. It drastically reduces the energy needed for cooling, plus an abundance of cheap hydropower. The market implication here is a complete land grab. The clear beneficiaries are hardware makers like NVIDIA and energy-rich regions, but the immense risk falls on smaller AI startups. If the table stakes to compete at the frontier model level are suddenly $10 billion for a single compute cluster, the vast majority of startups simply cannot afford to play. The financial moat is becoming incredibly deep, but building the data center is only half the battle, because AI models are currently suffocating on their own data bottlenecks. Their context windows, meaning the amount of information they can hold in active short-term memory at any given second, are expanding massively. We're moving from processing a few paragraphs to processing entire libraries of text simultaneously. The legacy way of moving data from a storage drive into active memory was simply not built for this era. Decades ago, if an enterprise system needed to retrieve a massive data set, we measured that retrieval time in minutes, sometimes longer. Today, if you have a state-of-the-art AI model that's starved for data because the storage drive can't feed it fast enough, those incredibly expensive processors in Norway just sit there idle. Retrieval has to happen in microseconds now. Here's the mechanics. Historically, the GPU had to ask the CPU to fetch data from storage. The CPU was the middleman. It would interrupt what it was doing, copy the data from storage into system memory, and then copy it again over to the GPU. Every step adds latency. Multiply that by thousands of autonomous AI agents making millions of simultaneous requests, and the entire system collapses. Think of the GPU as a customer in a restaurant, the CPU as the waiter, and storage as the kitchen. In a modern AI model, you don't have one customer. You have a million customers at a million tables, all screaming for their food at the exact same microsecond. The waiter system is fundamentally broken at that scale. Based on NVIDIA's recent announcements at the Future of Memory and Storage conference, the industry is redesigning the restaurant entirely. GPUs are now initiating storage requests directly, bypassing the CPU. NVIDIA is reportedly open sourcing its QFile APIs, a core part of their GPU direct storage protocol, with major players like Google, Intel, and Meta stepping in as maintainers. They launched a Storage Next initiative with over 40 vendors, including DDN, Kioxia, and Micron. The framework standardizing this is called SCADA, for Scaled Accelerated Data Access. Instead of waiting for a waiter, the GPU drives straight up to a high-speed drive-through window and pulls the data itself. But cheap compute in Norway is meaningless if the rest of the world runs out of electricity to build the same thing. And that is exactly what's happening right now. We are hitting a hard physical constraint, and local governments have begun aggressively pulling the plug on new developments. In one major US state, reports indicate the grid interconnection queue for new power connections has doubled in less than 6 months to around 474 gigawatts of pending demand. Roughly 90% of that demand is reportedly coming directly from data centers. To understand why that queue is such a crisis, look at the mismatch in deployment speeds. You can build a massive data center in about 12 to 18 months, but upgrading the heavy transmission lines required to actually carry hundreds of megawatts of electricity to that facility can take 5 to 10 years of planning and construction. It's like a highway system. Dropping a 133 megawatt data center onto the grid is like suddenly building 50 massive factories on a 2-lane country road. The physical transmission lines literally cannot carry that much traffic without melting. We're seeing this force the hand of major players. XAI, for instance, was reportedly forced by local authorities to remove unpermitted gas turbines they were using to power one of their data centers. But their response was incredibly telling. They aren't scaling down compute ambitions at all. They're reportedly transitioning to a permanent 1.2 gigawatt natural gas power plant for the facility. For context, 1.2 gigawatts is roughly the output of a large-scale nuclear reactor dedicated to a single corporate data center. Here's what this means for you. The growth of AI is now physically constrained by the electrical grid. Everyday consumers are at severe risk of seeing higher electricity prices as data centers compete for finite grid capacity. But for tech giants, the ability to secure independent power sources, whether that's funding new nuclear plants or building massive natural gas facilities, creates an insurmountable competitive advantage. If your competitor has to wait 5 years for a grid connection and you own your own power plant, you win the frontier model race by default. If you can no longer simply buy your way to dominance because the power grid is tapped out, the only remaining lever is human capital and intellectual property. You have to beat competitors by hoarding the smartest people on earth and fiercely protecting your internal breakthroughs. And this exact dynamic escalated dramatically this week. We just found out that Jeff Dean is officially leaving Google. For anyone unfamiliar, Jeff Dean was reportedly Google's 30th employee, a legendary figure in computer science, a key architect of Google Search's foundational infrastructure, and deeply involved in the creation of the Gemini models. He's reportedly leaving to start a brand new AI science company, taking massive backing with him from Alphabet, Khosla, and Radical Ventures. The talent pool capable of architecting and training these frontier models is surprisingly small. When a singular visionary leaves, they often take their most talented lieutenants with them. Brain drain is a real existential threat to legacy tech giants right now, which brings us to Apple. They are dramatically escalating their trade secret lawsuit against OpenAI. According to the filings, Apple now claims 11 additional former employees took proprietary unannounced product information with them when they moved to OpenAI, including names like Chang Liu and Tang Yutan. The filings also reportedly tangle up IO, the hardware startup co-founded by legendary ex-Apple designer Jony Ive. The allegations claim that former Apple employees used personal smartphones to take screenshots of confidential, unannounced Apple products right before their OpenAI interviews. Apple is reportedly seeking a preliminary injunction to legally stop OpenAI from building an AI device based on this information. OpenAI has issued a robust public rebuttal, stating unequivocally that they do not possess and do not want Apple's trade secrets. They point out some pretty significant operational flaws in Apple's case. For instance, Apple reportedly emailed the wrong person at OpenAI when trying to initiate contact simply because the employees shared a similar surname with their intended target. But the more critical technical defense revolves around what's called residual access. OpenAI argues that if former employees were able to log back into Apple's internal systems after their employment ended, it was purely due to Apple's failure to properly execute their offboarding procedures. It was a failure in basic identity and access management, not some sophisticated hack. Here's what this means for you. As open-weight models, particularly those emerging from China, close the performance gap with Western frontier models, The algorithms themselves are becoming somewhat commoditized. If the software is essentially becoming free, the only real moat left is proprietary hardware designs, unique infrastructure setups, and elite human capital. The secret isn't the code anymore, it's the institutional knowledge of how to wire 100,000 GPUs together without the entire cluster melting down. Which is why the era of moving fast and breaking things is rapidly transitioning to an era of slowing down and locking the doors. That need to lock the doors bridges perfectly into another major shift, securing the agents themselves. You cannot deploy these powerful systems safely if your AI is fundamentally insecure. The Open Secure AI Alliance is now reportedly over 120 organizations strong, partnering with the Linux Foundation to propose the SAFE guidelines, which stands for Shared AI Findings Exchange. And it's fascinating watching fiercely competitive tech giants like Amazon, Cisco, Microsoft, and NVIDIA openly sharing their threat intelligence. It isn't corporate altruism, it's absolute pragmatic necessity. AI completely changes the temporal dynamics of a cyber attack. We're now dealing with what they call agent speed. If a malicious actor discovers a novel prompt injection attack that hijacks an autonomous agent, they can reportedly automate that exploit to attack millions of systems in seconds. Defenders cannot wait weeks to patch a vulnerability anymore. To understand why this matters, think of the difference between a read-only system and a read-write system. A chatbot just reads your prompt and generates text. An AI agent is given permission to execute code, make API calls, access databases, and actually change things on a network. If a hacker finds a vulnerability in an autonomous agent that has database access, they could theoretically manipulate the agent into deleting your entire customer registry or siphoning proprietary data. The expanded attack surface is enormous, which is why NVIDIA is rolling out tools like OpenShell, a secure runtime environment that essentially creates a digital sandbox, strictly limiting what an AI agent can see and do on a network. They've also open sourced Garak, an automated stress testing tool that bombards a large language model with thousands of malicious prompts to see if it can trick the model into breaking its own rules before deployment. Microsoft is reportedly contributing similar automated red teaming tools, but one of the most sophisticated approaches comes from Uber. They shared a system called ADR Agentic AI Detection and Response, which reportedly tracks the full causal chain of over 200,000 agent sessions every single day. Think of an AI agent as a contractor working inside your house. A traditional security system just checks if the contractor used the right key at the front door. But Uber's ADR reportedly records every single room the contractor enters, which specific drawers they open, and exactly what tools they pick up. So if an agent that's only supposed to summarize marketing emails suddenly tries to access the payroll database, the system flags that anomalous sequence and shuts it down instantly. And CrowdStrike is reportedly fine-tuning an NVIDIA Nemotron Nano model specifically to analyze these security alerts, reportedly achieving 96% accuracy in cyber defense triage. They're using AI to secure AI, which contextualizes the broader debate dominating the industry this week, the call for deceleration. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman reportedly made comments about needing to pace the rate of AI development. He argued that we need time for society and enterprise businesses to harden around these new capabilities before releasing the next massive leap in intelligence. Anthropic has reportedly thrown support behind a similar petition calling for deceleration. But I have to ask this from a skeptical angle. Is this self-talk from CEOs like Altman actually altruistic concern for global safety? Or is it a convenient way for the current market leaders to pull up the ladder behind them? If you've already spent $10 billion on compute, secured your power plants, and hired the best talent advocating for industry-wide deceleration, is the perfect way to solidify your dominance. It's the classic regulatory capture argument. A heavily regulated environment or an industry consensus to slow down fundamentally favors the incumbents. The companies that already have massive compute clusters, secured energy contracts, and elite engineering teams are the only ones equipped to navigate heavy compliance burdens. They can afford to pace themselves. A startup cannot. Let's finish with what all this contested compute is actually building. There's a startup called Windborne Systems that just reportedly raised a $37 million Series B, pushing their valuation to $250 million. They're tackling weather prediction, which is historically one of the most computationally complex problems in human history. Traditionally, modeling the Earth's atmosphere required dividing it into a giant three-dimensional grid and calculating fluid dynamics and thermodynamics for every single cell, slowly stepping forward in time. It requires the largest, most expensive government supercomputers on Earth. Windborne is attacking this from two entirely new angles. First, physical data collection. They reportedly operate the world's longest endurance weather balloons, around 600, floating in the atmosphere right now, flying directly into the eyes of typhoons. They're also deploying aerial sensors that drop from the balloons into the ocean to become floating data buoys. Second, they're using deep learning AI models instead of traditional physics equations. An AI model doesn't calculate fluid dynamics grid cell by grid cell. It uses massive neural networks to recognize complex patterns from vast historical data and current sensor inputs. Because of that shift, complex weather simulations that used to require a multi-million-dollar supercomputer can now reportedly run on a standard laptop. They're already selling this data to national weather and defense agencies, and their primary commercial buyers are reportedly hedge funds and investment firms. Because if you know a freeze will hit Florida citrus farms 3 days before public models predict it, you know exactly how to trade orange juice futures. Now, that raises a fair question. If we're building $10 billion data centers so financial speculators can corner the orange juice market, is that a net positive for society? Windborne CEO John Dean reportedly describes this technology as building a planetary nervous system. Financial speculators may be the early adopters funding the infrastructure, but the same accurate prediction models are exactly what will protect global supply chains, safeguard agricultural yields, and give vulnerable communities much earlier warnings about catastrophic weather events. The commercial application essentially funds the public utility. The hedge fund is subsidizing the nervous system until it scales enough to protect everyone. Let me pull all of this together. We started with robots, finally gaining physical bodies, using vision language action models to bypass hard coding and learn physical dynamics from video. We moved into the multi-billion-dollar compute grab, pushing state power grids to the breaking point, forcing AI companies to build their own gigawatt-scale power plants. We looked at how internal data center architecture is literally rewiring itself with SCADA and microsecond storage drive-throughs. We examined the cutthroat legal and talent wars now that software is being commoditized. And finally, the industry's push to secure autonomous agents and potentially slow the runaway train. Here's the takeaway for you as an informed professional looking at this landscape over the next 3 to 12 months. Do not get distracted by incremental feature updates of the latest chatbot. The real strategic shifts are happening in the physical world. You need to watch how energy limitations, grid interconnection queues, and strict new security regulations are going to dictate what kind of AI actually gets deployed in your specific industry. The ultimate winners in this next phase will not be the companies with the smartest algorithm. They'll be the companies who can physically power it and securely integrate it into the real world. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. If public state-run power grids simply cannot handle the immense, continuous demand of the AI revolution, will the biggest tech companies of tomorrow actually be forced to become the biggest private energy and utility companies in the world just to survive? The data center of the future might just be a power plant that happens to run code, something worth sitting with. Thanks for going down this week with me. I'll see you on the next